So you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
All right. Let me close this up and we will begin. So welcome everyone to our first kind of Orchid chat presentation. This is for Niños. We're all so happy that you joined, all of our new members, and we're happy that existing members are also here. So the presentation that we're giving today is all about orchid plant parts and orchid flower parts. The wonderful world of orchids can be kind of confusing, and there's a lot of terminology going on. So this is going to break down some of the basic stuff and talk about the plants that we all love. I was talking earlier, this is a great example of some of our lovely orchids that exist in the world. This was at an orchid display at a botanical garden in 2018. Their theme was like Asia. So this is like just some of the stuff we can get excited about. It's all the different kinds of orchids that are out there and their wonderful shades and the flowers that we all really like to look at and wait for. That's a big part of having orchids, is waiting for them to bloom.
In the meantime, we can look at the pretty pictures.
And remember. So in attendance, okay. Attending today, so you have myself, Lander Lennon, and Elise Dubois, who's my co-host. I am just kind of like you, I'm an orchid enthusiast. I have just a couple of phals. I'm still a bit new to the wonderful world of orchids, so I'm excited to share with you guys stuff that I've learned so far. And Elise?
I'm also an orchid enthusiast. I love orchids. I've got about 60 orchids, I think 65 total. And I collect mainly species orchids, but got a few hybrids. And I like weird orchids. The weirder, the better.
And also attending today are all of you. And we are really excited that everyone is here to join us. This is our first time doing one of these presentations, so we are thrilled about the attendance. And I see that we have a question. Becky raised her hand.
No, I gave you a clapping, like, yay, we're all here. Sorry.
No problem.
I am still definitely, though, new to Zoom. I'm not super hip with the techness.
We'll figure it out together, and we appreciate all of you guys being here.
Yeah, and just to kind of keep track, because everyone's different on the internet with our little aliases. If anyone is not a new member, if you could maybe write your favorite kind of orchid in the chat, that might kind of open up the conversation a little bit too in the chat box. So we're going to just dive right into it too. Oh, I don't like that this is not click. So we're starting off with some of our basic orchid parts. This is an entire orchid plant. This is a Phalaenopsis. I don't know, can you guys see my mouse?
We can.
Great. Mac also has this great feature. If I really circle something, my mouse gets a little bit bigger. So starting from 9 to 16 somehow, just some other facts about orchids too. So our orchids are in the Orchidaceae family, which is one of the largest family of flowering plants, which means that there are so many that you can get into and collect and learn all about caring for. To know more about your plant, we'll start at the obvious part, which is the flowers, the part that we all maybe love the most. Those are up here at number 9. And then working your way down, at number 10, you've got the stake, which is holding up your flowers. It's like the plant flower stem. You have nodes on your stake. Nodes on plants are just growing points. So sometimes it's a growing point where the plant, just like on an orchid like this, would just continue to grow upwards. On like maybe a tree or something, it's going to kind of branch outwards. It's what the plant wants to do with the resource it's being given. And then the space in between nodes, just for fun, is called the internode. Continuing down at number 12, we have the leaves. The leaves are basically what's kind of keeping your plant alive in a lot of ways, but not always for orchids. Sometimes your roots can also play a big part in that. But leaves are catching all the sun and they're grabbing all that energy and they're going yum yum yum. This is so good, and they're turning into nutrients so your plant can grow big and strong. Light is a really important part of growing orchids. So your leaves are really important for your orchid plant. And 13, this picture doesn't show a great kind of example of it, but you've got your spike, so your flower spike. So that's kind of just that green stem that's pushing up. Oh, we have a question in the chat. Elise, can you see the chat?
Yeah. So that was just Janet saying that she's been growing orchids for 20 years, but does best with cooler growing pleurothalids.
I see. Well, perfect. Thank you, Janet. You're still, oh, no. Still getting into this. So then continuing down, we've got our leaves going down to the roots. So sometimes orchids will have roots in the soil. Sometimes they are poking out. Orchids are really interesting because the medium that they're growing in has a lot to do with the roots and where they're going to be going. So growing medium can vary kind of per your plant type. So some orchids are going to grow better in bark. Some of them sphagnum moss. You've got clay pellets. You've got soil. Some of them are also kind of just going to hang and they'll be happy with a little bit of moss because there are orchids that grow on trees and they're really thrilled. So there's lots of different things you can do to give your orchid its perfect environment. And then it still might not be perfect enough because orchids are really picky, but you can always try. And then, so you've got roots that are sticking out over the pot. They're up in the air. They're still doing a job. They're also, because they're green, they're grabbing some of that light and going, yum, 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 thank you so much. And then you've got down 16 down here in our pots. Luckily, this picture is a clear pot. You can see that there's roots under there too, and they're doing their very best job at keeping your orchid alive. And then we'll get into the orchid flower.
Yeah, so orchids are like any other flowering plant. They've got all the same parts. It's just a little different. So we're going to go back to like high school biology here where we dissected a flower. But orchids have sepals and petals. They've got 3 sepals and 3 petals, but one of the petals is called the lip, and it's a modified petal. In a lot of orchids, it acts as kind of a pollinator landing strip. And it's kind of the most unique part about the orchids. And it's one of the reasons that make orchids a little different than other flowering plants. They also have a column, which is the structure that holds a lot of the reproductive parts. So it's a combination of the stamen and the pistil, as you see in the picture to the left. And each of these orchids displays these features a little differently. So we'll kind of be going through some different genuses and giving some examples of how they show up. So you kind of know what you're looking at when you look at a flower. I'm going to spend a little more time talking about the column because it's weird. And it's got one of, I think, the weirdest things in orchids is, which is their pollinia. Pollinia are pollen sacs. So instead of having loose pollen like, trees, or it's the reason that you've been sneezing these past few weeks, right? They collect all of their pollen into little bags that are called pollinia, or singular pollinium. And they use this to stick it on the back of pollinators. So there's a little sticky pad that they have. So pollinator will fly in there, somehow, get stuck with this pollen and then fly away and hopefully pollinate another flower. The column is just this modified structure that contains both the male and female parts of the flower.
And speaking of flowers, we'll move right into our first one, which is a really straightforward example of all these things. You can see them really well. This is one that I think we're all pretty familiar with. This is our Phalaenopsis. These are your kind of like grocery store orchids. These are the ones you're seeing all the time, really. They're a really great example too, because they have these nice big flat flowers, and they are a great learning tool for us today. So I've gone through and labeled all of the different parts. So we have our sepals, which are A, and A, making that triangle right there. And they are, believe it or not, different from our petals, which are B and B over here. And you know, we're being like, but Lander, those are all the same colors. They look pretty much the same. Why? Which is a great question. So basically, when your orchid is in bud, which I have a great example, I don't know if you guys can see very well. It has budding flowers have this like, I don't know, the bud. It's a little protected little thing in there. So the sepals are basically that little shell that's saying, the flower's inside, thanks so much. And then it opens up and these petals just kind of are like, thank you for letting me go, I'm free. And they all look similar, but the petals and sepals are different. And then you go down, so you've got C, which luckily on this Phalaenopsis is a different color too, so it makes it really easy to see what's going on here. This is the lip. This is that part that's jutting out. This is your pollinator landing strip. It's there. It's different. It's sticking out. It's not flat like our petals and sepals are. And then D, which is that column, which is that specialized structure that Elise was talking about. That one is also pretty easy to see. It's this kind of white bit going on here, right, Elise?
Yep. Yeah.
Some of them it looks a little different. So this is a great breakdown of these column structures. And then moving on to something that looks a little similar but is different, we have Cattleyas. This is kind of a similar feature. It's great though that you can really see the difference between those specialized kind of shell sepals, our A's here, and our lovely B petals, because they are not quite so much the same in this photo. They're kind of out there, a little bit more exaggerated, and a lot more exaggerated is our lip on this one. This whole guy here, we're talking from here to here. This is the lip. It's big, it's out there, it's really jutting out. It's like, look at me, I'm great. Cattleyas are great. They're very pretty.
And a lot of them are fragrant too. So
it's exciting. And then we have our column, which in this one is tucked back a little bit. So all of our orchids are also kind of specialized. There's a reason that everything is in its place. What's really cool too about Cattleyas, besides being very pretty and kind of showing off, is that each First Lady of the United States of America has a Cattleya that is named after them. So the breeder of these specialized plants actually spoke to our club last year. That was, I think, one of the first meetings that I attended, and I just loved it so much. It was so interesting to hear how he hybridized all of these and how he presented them to the first ladies and how their reactions were. I can't remember. I think it was our current first lady, Jill Biden, or maybe it was the one before, Melania Trump. No, I think it was Melania Trump. She didn't have time, or some reason their schedules were just conflicting, and he couldn't seem to get her this Cattleya. So he went to the chef of the White House, who he knew well, and he was like, you got to show her these flowers. Like, she has to see, this is literally hers. And he goes, all right, I got you. He took all of these orchids and he adorned her breakfast plate with them. And she was like, wow, these are so great. Thank you. And she sent him a nice thank you note. So every First Lady has seen their Cattleya and enjoyed it. Moving forward to Dendrobium, I think that's you, Elise.
yeah, I can take it. So Dendrobium is another genus of orchids. It's one of the largest genus of orchids, and there's a few different categories. You've got orchid flowers like these, which are called Phalaenopsis dendrobiums, not to be confused. But they have a very similar structure to Phalaenopsis. There's also black hair type dendrobiums and nobly type dendrobiums, and they'll all require slightly different care. But this dendrobium in our picture looks very similar to a Phalaenopsis, just a little different. Again, you can see the sepals that are kind of in the back that are smaller and narrower, and the petals that are a little larger. So we've got C, which is the lip right in the center there, and then tucked right up above that is the column.
And then we move on to another great example. This one kind of is like the similar size kind of going on with the Cymbidium, although every plant ranges, they can have different kind of flower sizes. But going along with that, luckily this one, we have different colors in case you were kind of like, what do I do if they're all the same color? How can I tell these different parts apart? That was fun. So it's kind of the same feature in a lot of these. So you've got the back three making that triangle as your sepals. You've got the petals kind of making that V in front. You've got that lip jutting out, which is C, which luckily in this one too, you can kind of see from some of these side angles that it does kind of shape differently. And you can also see from these side angles that your column is up there. He is out there. He's different. He's up at the top, kind of. Cymbidiums are also really cool because they're one of the oldest cultivated orchids. So in China, they were really kind of into these guys. At least you had a great fact about woven golden baskets that I really liked.
Oh, that was with Neophoenicia, a kind of similar plant, but I think Cymbidiums on like the 4 plants of each season in China, a type of Cymbidium is, I think it's like the winter plant maybe, but it's still a very oldly cultivated plant.
Yeah, and this one is super like known for its genes. When they hybridize plants, so when they mix and match plants to make a new plant, they really like Cymbidiums because they're like, Cymbidiums have those good genes that we want. They're like the pair of genes that always fits. Also, moving on to my favorite, I saw some really great ones of these at the New York Botanic Orchid show, which I went to last month with Janet, which was great. I love these bulldog guys. They really do it for me. They are super exaggerated and out there, and I love everything about them. So these are a little different too, because they're like, Lander, where's the triangle? They close up a little differently. That triangle's not there. But we still have our sepal A up here. We have these 2 petals, which do look a little bit different, so you can tell the difference. We have the lip. The lip is this big pouch, which is great. Pollinators love that. They put this nice, sweet substance out, these flowers do. And a lot of times, like bees and other pollinators are like, that smells really nice. So they crawl down in there and they're like, oh, I'm stuck. The only thing they can do to crawl out is grab onto all these little bits inside the orchid and get covered in all their wonderful pollen and sweet smells. And then they move on to the next orchid and they pollinate that. So nature has really thought this through, and it smells nice while it does it. The column on this guy is a little pushed back. So in some of our other ones, like the Cymbidium we just talked about, that column was kind of like out there. Some of them have been up a little bit or shaped. This guy's a little bit flatter. He's in the back, but it's all by design.
So next we move on to Masdevallias. Again, we put this one in to kind of show and highlight some of the diversity within orchids. This flower is pretty much all sepal. That orange, reddish orange color is all the sepals, and the petals are actually very small and kind of tucked up in that center area there. This was a hard picture. You can't really see the column or anything on there, but it's in there, and they're probably pollinated by a very small fly. So it'd be a very small column in there. And then the lip again is almost non-existent right at the bottom there.
He's teeny tiny. It works because I think this one is a teeny tiny plant.
It might be. Yeah, they range in size from like standard to miniatures and like micro miniatures too.
Another weird one out here.
Yeah, this is Bulbophyllum. This is another one of the largest genuses of orchids. Either the first or the second, it's Dendrobium or Bulbophyllum, depending on who you ask.
Well, depending on how many they've discovered recently and the renaming.
Oh yeah,
It's
and then
named all the time.
they'll group it out of Dendrobium or Bulbophyllum, but that's a whole nother conversation. The taxonomy of orchids. Bulbophyllums are really interesting because they have a hinged lip. So that part that's C, that's actually in white in this picture, will actually kind of wiggle and waggle in the wind. And when a pollinator lands on it, it'll throw itself into the column. And that's how they get the pollinator to stick the pollinia on them. In this example, it's also kind of interesting because the sepals are these like big things at the bottom. And in this flower, they're actually fused together. And then there's the dorsal sepal, which is that little hood that's on top. The petals, again, in this picture are kind of tight, like looking out like that. And then that yellow thing in the center is the column.
Some of these coordinate themselves very well to be great learning tools with their colors.
Yeah. And another one, because I had to put some other weird genuses. This is a Stanhopea. This is a side picture of the flowers. These are pretty weird orchids. You don't see them around too often, and their flowers only last for a day. So a lot of people don't like them because of that. But if you ever have the chance to see a Stanhopea in person, it's so much cooler than this because they're a really weird, large flower that's kind of hard to describe. But in this picture, it's a side view, and there's two of them there. Stanhopeas are pollinated by euglossine bees. So they produce a lot of fragrance and like fragrant wax that the bee goes in and it'll crawl up on the lip, which is the C part, which is this weird speckly maroon white thing there. And it'll collect all the wax and try to make itself smell as nice as possible in order to attract a mate. And then in that process, this long column that's D, the bee will kind of get stuck in. And then in this case, these sepals are much larger and almost look like wings. These always kind of remind me of birds. And then the petals are what's labeled in B here, and they kind of come out and they're a little narrower.
Those are very cool. And I think it's great to see them from a side view because we've seen a lot of them from up front and some of them from the side, but this is a really in-depth kind of photo. I think it also highlights one of the other great orchid hobbies of orchid photography, which is where people like to get shots like these and they do all sorts of things to achieve that. But kind of save some of the best ones for last. So is there any questions anyone has? We are happy to kind of answer them. We'll go back to our opening slide. That's a real great one to look at.
I just want you to tell me what are I don't know if you could see the flower on my Masdevallia. So, I mean, here it is, and it's very hard to figure out the orchid part. And, I don't even really care. So it's an orchid. And here's another really weird one. Oh, no, where is it? So the petal is so hardly not open. Let me see. I can't even get it in the camera. But oh, nope. So that's not going to show up very good. But it's fully open, and it is one of these crazy pleurophthalids. And anyway, I would just never be able to decide what the parts. This is much easier.
Mhm.
This is a Miltonia, and it's kind of pretty straightforward with the two petals, three sepals. I don't know. Big
Yeah,
lip.
making that great little triangle in the V, and then
Yeah, so
getting off
this
that
was
lip in the
so
column
much
in the
easier, to show. But but they're wonderful, and it I don't know how they decide what orchids are really orchids, but here we go. We hope that everything they've told us about orchids is true. So anyway,
Well, luckily too for you, Janet, we are recording this and sending it out to all of our members, so you can come back later and be like, let me rethink, let me let me dissect it.
yeah. But no, I'm not touching these flowers. They're too beautiful and so hard to come by. Yeah. So
Great.
yes, but I was very glad to see the Masdevallia picture. That it almost looks like they're fused as well.
Bug on me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think they do have a fused sepal.
Yeah,
Especially in this one, it looks like it.
Yep. So, but they're all fascinating and wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of diversity too within the family.
That's why I love them. Yeah.
Gotta highlight the diversity.
I'll shut up. I'm old at this. So here we go.
Well, great. Do we have any other questions? We are also available to kind of, if you think of something in the meantime, the American Orchid Society is a really great resource. We'll be sending out this presentation as well. And keep those questions and bring them to the meeting. There are a lot of really great experienced members who are thrilled to talk to you, and they'll be so excited to tell you how they're growing and, hear all about how you're growing and really help you. We have beginner talks at the beginning of our meetings, which is a perfect place for them. And so those are always really informative, and just ask questions. And we also hope to see you next month, because we will be doing these every month in between the meetings. So you get that extra dose, kind of trying to give you the quick and dirty on orchids every month.
Yeah, so the meetings are the first Saturday of the month. Is that right? And then our talks will be the second Monday or Tuesday.
So we're kind of keeping it flexible. So we also hope that works for your schedule. We'll be sending out a little survey too. So we are happy to hear what you really thought of this and what you want to hear and learn about, because we're really here for you. We're really excited that we got so many great new members. So thank you all very much for attending.
Say how many people there?
Yeah, we actually got 14.
14.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Wonderful. Oh, we have great. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for attending. I think we'll end it there. Elise, do you have anything else?
Not too much. Just, if you see me at the meeting, feel free to stop in and say hi. I can talk about orchids all day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening to us for a half hour.
Right.
Okay. Well, it'll be on again, so.
Right. And we will